interview in the Student Activities Office. It's on November 17th, 1994. It's part of the Oral History Project, and it's Nancy Grossman, Phillip Emilio, and Lynn Glazer, part of Student Activities. I'm Carol Pohl, and I teach sociology, and it's part of the Oral History Project for the 50th anniversary. Okay, if we could start, and maybe we'll start with you, Lynn, if you just tell us your present position, how long you've been at FIT.
My present position is program coordinator. I am here 25 years. I did not start as a program coordinator. I was a clerical assistant and worked my way up. I didn't start programming events. I was just doing the clerical work. I was the front desk person. And 25 years ago, this building did not exist. I was interviewed in C building, but there was no room for student activities in C building. They were changing offices. And I worked in 242 West 27th, which is across the street. And we had a little office on one side of the floor. The other side was counseling, and payroll was on the second floor. And we stayed there till 1975, something. 75.
With the opening in the new building.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then we moved here, and we're here.
And tell us your name and your position there.
I'm Nancy Grossman, and I am Director of Student Life. The name of our office and department and organization has been changed recently. It was a long time in coming, about 3 or so years, that we proposed the change from student activities to student life. We felt that it better reflected what we really do and what we have been doing for the last 20 or so years, which is really working with the student development of the students at the college and their growth and their life skill learning. And as such, the term student activities didn't really apply. So we recently and successfully were able to get it changed. But I have been here at FIT for 1973 I started, so it's 21 years, 22 years, almost 22 years. When I was hired in the summer of 1973, I was hired to start a full student life or student activity program. Prior to that time, there was no student union building. The new buildings were not yet complete, but the plan for them was obviously well underway. And the plan was that the A building, or the David Dubinsky Student Center, would be a student union building. I believe it took about 8 or 10 years from the time they actually broke ground to really completing these buildings. And during that time, although their original plan was to have this be a complete student union building, things changed. Needs of the college changed, and they took away space and floors from what would have been the student union building and assigned it over to other areas. So by the time we actually moved in 1975, we really just had one floor, which is what we basically still have 20 some odd years later. One floor dedicated to all of the extracurricular or co-curricular programs of the college, whether they be student clubs or student government or the student mail folders or the yearbook, newspaper, all of those kinds of things, basically has the one floor with several other small locations throughout the building to call their own, basically. When I was hired in 73, we, as Lynn said, we were housed across the street because the buildings were not finished, and we were working out our preliminary plans for activities when the building would open over there. And we were on what floor? The second?
Third.
The third floor of a walk-up.
No, Jimmy.
I walked up. Because Jimmy, who is our wonderful elevator man, he was wonderful, knew everybody, loved the college, and really kept everybody happy as we were going up and down this really pretty dilapidated building, I would say. So I walked up a lot because the elevator never was on the first floor too often, so I walked. But I was younger then. And that was my exercise for the day. But as Lynn said, we were in the back in a very small office, and in the front of the building was counseling with Sis Fishgrund, who was director of counseling at the time. And we would basically plan one event A what? A month? Maybe
no,
2 or 3
more,
a month?
But not
Very,
nothing
very,
like this.
right. Because there was no location on the campus to have events. The only place we really had was what was called Palm Court. Palm Court is basically the lobby of the C building, or was the lobby of the C building, and the back behind the escalator banks. And that's where we could have events. But you also have to understand that at that time there were only 2,000 students. When I first got here, there were approximately 2,000 students, each of whom were paying approximately $6 in a student activity fee. And so the amount of money we had, $10,000 to $12,000, and 2,000 students, and very limited space, we did what we could with that space. Our office at the time, when I was hired, I replaced, and correct me if I'm wrong, 2 individuals that were also part of our office staff. There was a student activities counselor, Sue Clark, and an assistant dean of students, Mary Jones. When Mary Jones retired,
she moved to
or
dean.
Moved to the dean, right, for a year before she retired. And Sue Clark left, and I came in. So we lost a person, basically, right away. From a very small office, we lost a staff member. There was also Nettie Levine, who was our, what was her title? Secretary, office secretary at the time, I suppose.
And then she went to administrator. So.
Right. She moved up the ladder, too. Yeah. Everybody moved up the ladder. And there was Gail Langsner, who was in that office working on alumni and foreign student affairs within them. And Lynn, right? Mm-hmm. That was it. And about 2 years later, Phil Caine, having graduated from the school and then having interned here in this office, and then came on board. But with Phil's addition, we were still basically minus a person or two from the original group that was there. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, we are still at that point 22 years later, which is one of the things that, has distressed us over the years, that as the school has expanded to more than double, we are still plugging away, trying to do our best to come up with a full co-curricular program. That's basically how it all started. Oh, I just wanted to add something to you. We didn't just stay into 242 before we came into this building.
That's right.
We were shifted over to the lobby of the C building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where Elaine Stone's office is right now.
Right, and what had been the business office or admissions office, one of the two.
It was the business office.
Right.
Yeah.
For a temporary holding pattern until the building was ready. So we really shifted around before we got into this building. And we were charged with the opening of this building. One of the reasons I was hired was that President Feldman, Marvin, was a really strong advocate of student life. And with the buildings and with all of the new space and what he foresaw as the future growth of the college, he really wanted a full program, not just 1 or 2 events a month in Palm Court. And he turned to me and he said, Nan, do something every day. Have something going on every day and every night of the week. And I remember working with everybody in the office saying, all right, Monday night will be Monday night films. And Tuesday night will be whatever, Tuesday night social event, and Wednesday night craft center event, and Thursday night disco, and then Thursday night Binsky's, which was our attempt at a real college kind of pub, hangout, social event that for many years was a huge success.
Was in the building you had a pub?
Well,
downstairs.
What is now Binsky's, which is basically the basement of this
Yeah.
building, named after David Dubinsky. That's why that's called Binsky's.
Why was the building named after David Dubinsky?
He gave a lot of money, I'm
Phil?
sure.
He gave a lot of money?
And a head.
I don't know if he gave any.
Wait, I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just, I guess, to honor him.
FIT is founded under the auspices of the garment industry and related industries. And David Dubinsky was a labor leader, a big labor leader.
He was president of the ILGW.
Yes, for many years. And his strength and support, and the support of the ILG helped FIT come together. As a matter of fact, on the Board of Trustees, there's a representative of the ILG. And so this building was named in honor of David Dubinsky, but at the same time, it honors the ILG.
Yeah, he was at the groundbreaking.
Yeah, he was here for the groundbreaking ceremony.
Yes.
Yeah. little old guy.
And then for quite a long time, is it still? It's not still
It's
there.
not
there.
there.
I don't know where it is.
Was a bust
Bust.
of. Is that just his head? Just his head?
Yeah.
On a pedestal as you walk into the lobby of this
Bronze.
building. A bronze bust of his David Dubinsky's head. I don't know where that is now, though.
No, I don't know either.
Okay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, okay. I'm Phillip Emilio, and my relationship with FIT goes back to when I was a student. That's when I first found out about FIT from my sister, who was an FBM student. In 1970, she was a student, and I had just been discharged from the Army. And a year later, 1971, I started going to FIT. One of the things I did when I was in the service was photography, and FIT had a photography major. So my sister said to me, "Why don't you try it?" So my portfolio was pictures taken in Vietnam, but that helped get me in. And one thing led to another. My relationship with student life and student activities, as it was called then, was that I became very actively involved in the programs as a student leader. And in turn, we, a student group, was able to attend a leadership workshop. And as a result of that leadership workshop, it refocused my career direction. And I said, I want to do that. And in fact, it's one of the responsibilities that I have now as a counselor here. But being involved in the extracurricular training and the kinds of learning that took place for me was so rewarding and so much of a growth for me personally that I thought that that would be a nice way to be an educator. I thought of becoming a teacher, and I thought that being an educator in the experiential learning area, if you want to call it that, would be very appropriate for somebody who learned that way, and I learned that way. And I also thought that there are lots of other people who can learn that way. And so then I continued with my associate's degree here and finished that program, and at the end of that time, I graduated after 2 years with an AAS in photography and met Nancy. And
you can't forget that you were president of the student government.
Yeah.
well, I was very actively involved in student
He was
life.
president of the student government and was on the search committee of students who interviewed me.
Yeah, so I met Nancy in the spring of 1973 through the interview process, and I was one of a couple of students who were interviewing for the student activities counselor to be in charge there, because Sue Clark, as Nancy said, was leaving, and we also interviewed for the dean of students, and I met Richard Strider at that time also. He then became the dean of students. So I maintained a relationship then with Nancy, and in fact consulted with her, and she advised me because I did want to go into this field. And she recommended that I go to NYU because there was a graduate program there. So I finished my baccalaureate program through SUNY Empire State College, and I received my BA, and still kept my connection with FIT. Went through, followed up on Nancy's recommendations, and in fact had to do an internship. And an internship then that I did was here under Nancy in student activities, and helped design the layout and programming for the craft center, which exists here now. And I worked on programs such as Leadership Workshop and the Student Game Room. Those were some of the things that were in motion. The only one that was actually happening at the time was the Leadership Workshop. The others were on the drawing board. And 1975, I graduated from NYU, and there was an opening here, and Nancy and Richard Strider offered the position, and of course I grabbed it. It's back home, is what I felt like. I was coming back home. And in that time period, Nancy and Lynn have already described where we were, because I did move into 242
Right.
West 27th
With a
Street,
little desk.
and I had a little
That's when he was in
table. I did not have a phone. I didn't have a file cabinet. I had a little table, and I had stacks and stacks of files.
You
that I
still
didn't have-
do.
Yeah, at that time I didn't even have a file cabinet.
That's right.
It was funny because some people came one time and shuffled all my files around. I went crazy. so that's the beginning, and my interest, of course, is in teaching students through experience, and it's a very rewarding experience. And now I'm the junior employee here.
That's
so
right.
This is my 20th year.
He's the baby in the group.
21. What's
22. It'll be 22 this year.
So that's the beginning. And
Could you explain what the Crafts Center is?
sure. In the Craft Center, which, by the way, we're working on changing the name, because in the beginning it was for making pottery and doing darkroom work, various arts, various crafts, weaving or macrame, things like that. And over the years, the needs of the students and the facilities we have, we kept trying to match them up. There were certain things that students just didn't do, and then there were some things that we cannot do because of the cost for keeping the air quality clean or dealing with other safety and hazards that come as a result of using a darkroom or firing a kiln. We had a kiln in there too. We had 2 kilns. So we had to phase some things out, and then we phased in others. And what we do now is we have arts extracurricular education, so airbrush or stained glass making, model making. A lot of students make small models, especially in interior design. We have batiking, we have screen printing for T-shirts, and students get to learn how to do that and do their own.
This is for non-course credit.
This is all
Is
extracurricular.
it free that they can come
It's
here?
free, yes.
They just sign up for classes that are offered.
Workshops,
we
demonstrations.
Yes, we have programs just about every day of the week. Some days that we have drawing sessions, so students can come in and practice their drawing, as well as students who aren't necessarily in an art major and they like to draw. They can come here. So we work with students who also teach or prepare programs in cooking, learning about the various ethnic cooking preparations, health and nutrition. It has expanded, and now we do exercise and stress management. We even have massage lessons.
Belly dancing.
Belly dancing, and the culture of where
Cha-cha.
belly dancing
Cha-cha.
comes from, which is the Middle East. So there was a lot of programs just around that, as well as modern dancing, ballroom dancing. I mean, the list of programs goes on and on and
I
on.
think what's really if you really think about it historically, if you really, and it's fun to do that because we're so busy every day doing it that you forget how it's really changed. When the building was first opened, it came with this wonderful craft center with equipment, darkroom equipment and kilns. No staffing, but just the equipment. And we worked and finagled and arranged to get it staffed with at that time, by the hour students, technicians, not even technicians, by the part-time people. And they really were limited to, they really worked on those areas, the black and white development of pictures, the kilns, and I remember going in and seeing stacks and stacks within a wire mesh cabinet of all of these examples of students' work, some of them superb and some of them as bad as mine, crooked jars and thumbprints into all sorts of, it was really very interesting. But as Phil has mentioned, over the years, the student body here has totally changed. When there were 2,000 students, it was really pretty homogeneous. Clearly, mostly female, by far, as it still is percentage-wise, but nowhere near as great a difference as it was back then. It was predominantly female. And basically white. The diversity was really not there. And as we've watched over the years, it's marvelous. It is absolutely a mini world, a microcosm of everything right here. And our programs reflect that. And I think the Craft Center is really a prime example of that, because from the traditional Craft Center kinds of activities of crafts, hobbies and crafts and working with your hands on things, to really film showings, videotapes, dancing, cooking, based on ethnic and cultural diversity is really phenomenal.
And what was the ethnic group of the students who were there 20 years ago and today? What do you see in terms of difference? Are you saying white?
In ethnic?
Yeah.
I would say it was predominantly white 22 years ago.
Which group? I mean, was Italian
Oh,
Americans,
I think it was
Greek
Jewish.
Americans, Eastern
I
European,
would have
Jewish
ventured to
Americans?
say it was probably
Long Island?
higher Jewish than it reflects
First
now.
generation college, is that?
Oh, clearly still first, yeah.
European.
Computer?
And a lot of
European white.
European white, and a higher Jewish percentage of people.
Commuter
but basically
students
white.
who lived in the
Well,
area?
we only
Oh,
had one
yeah.
dormitory then,
Right,
and it was,
right.
in fact, the first dorm was all women.
Right.
When I was a student in 71 to 73, only women lived in
Nagler Hall.
one dormitory.
And all women.
Would you say that most of the students, this was their first generation college?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
What hasn't changed, I do believe, is the fact that the student body still is not only primarily first generation or very close to it, but also all very much involved with working, the need to work, on financial aid, although I'm sure the numbers have increased. That was still pretty much the picture back then. A lot of family responsibilities outside of school, and certainly commuters.
I think there's a lot. There's typically the working class Americans who come here and rejoin working class America in their profession, whether it's in the retail industry or wherever, as far as how they're trained through FIT. But we have a large percentage of international students, and they infiltrate within the student body and try to be American. And one of the interesting evolutions that have taken place is that our students learn from them and they learn from our students, and we get to share and help each other. And there are so many different clubs that they wind up in, that through the clubs and other extracurricular programs, they get to learn, the foreign students get to learn about America and the process that takes place here, the democratic process, as well as being able to socialize and learn traditions that take place here in America, and then they blend in. The programming that we do emphasizes the diversity that exists on campus and the world, and helps the student prepare for entering the work world, where all this diversity is, and that's where it takes place, beyond the block in Brooklyn where they grew up, which might be one similar group.
Lynn, give an example of the kind, the difference in the programming that has occurred since when we first started as to now, what kinds of things we do.
Well, we have a lot of diversity programs. We used to have, it was just a comedian or a band would play, magicians, and it was all done in the auditorium. And it was and dance programs. And it was real difficult. These students just didn't want to go to the auditorium. There was no amphitheater at the time. And then when everything was all built, we figured, well, bring the programs to them. And that's why we have a lot of cafeteria programs. There's also a lounge on the 5th floor, the Pizza Lounge, which is a smaller area, but people always hang out there. The lecture programs, we have a lot of
AIDS awareness.
the AIDS. We have an AIDS Awareness Week, substance abuse programs. We usually do those in the amphitheater, which is a nice space. So the programs have gone from a little band to
What are
a
some of the
comedian.
typical clubs, when you're talking about the diversity, what are the groups that come?
Well,
That
we
the
had
clubs reflect?
We had a club 20 years ago that was called the Oriental Society.
Right.
And that no longer exists because the groups within the Oriental Society wanted to be identified
Branch out.
as to who they in fact are. So from that, we have a Korean club,
There was
we've had a Japan club.
Chinese Students Association, Korean, a second Korean group.
KCCC, Korean Crusade for Christian.
Christ program.
Right. So from the one base, there are all of these others that have developed. But I think that's also not only symbolic of what happened here, it's happening all over the country over the past 20 years. As the diversity has grown, as the number of different ethnic and religious and cultural groups have come onto campuses, the need for some identity, the need to keep some identity of their own background is even stronger. Whereas in the beginning, everybody was trying to assimilate and join forces and mesh and melting pot into let's all get together and share and do together. Because there's so many different groups on campus, smaller in number, there's no one majority type of person, that each of those groups feel more of a need to keep their identity. And although they share and do and join in with other groups, they really want to promote their own culture, their heritage, let people understand more about them, and therefore they stay, in that sense, within their own. And we have everything from a Greek society to a LASO, Latin American Students Organization, to trace the names of the African Heritage Club. Lynn. What did it start out as?
It was the Soul Club. Then it was, which is still the Soul Club. Then they branched out to, it was called African History. Now they're called African Heritage.
And so that too is reflective of their identity and their desire to let the world know their roots. And that's very strong. So we started out, I don't know, how many clubs were there 20 years ago?
Maybe 10.
10? We now have over 60 clubs and organizations. It goes between 60 and 65. Some each year
some drop out,
become inactive, others come back. So that's a huge growth of extracurricular clubs and organizations over that period of time, all reflecting the different types of people and interests on the campus.
Just for clarification, when you talk about foreign students or international, are these students here to study and go back to their home? Are these students?
Some go back.
What's your impression that, like the ones who are in the clubs?
I think it's a mix.
It's a mix at this point.
Some students, their families are in the garment industry some way or another, and their family is sponsoring them to come back so they can come back home and help with the family business. And that could be Japan or Canada or wherever, Germany. Other students come here because they're interested in the field the same way the typical student might be, and some of them want to stay here. They do whatever they can, getting internships or whatever, and try to become an American citizen or get a green card so they can stay and work, because a foreign student is not allowed to work only under certain
I think 6 months they're allowed or something.
yeah, maybe through internship, because they're in school. There are certain rules there, and we hear about that. We learned about that.
That group of population has grown tremendously since I got here. When we first started doing any kind of programming for foreign students, I don't remember what year this was, but I remember the list was 50. There were 50 to 60 foreign students. The list this year is somewhere above 450. And they are really, as Phil mentioned before, an integral part of this campus.
By foreign students, you mean born in another country? Or international students?
International students.
Oh, they're
international
coming here for a short period of time.
Right.
Their residence is another country, and they came here just to go to FIT.
They're here to go to college. And that number has grown tremendously. And really has had an impact on the whole student body and their interaction, as Phil mentioned before.
There are students who come here also as their first generation college, and they're exploring, and then they learn a little bit more about themselves, and we see this happen through the extracurricular or student life area. We've had students who have been active here, maybe very much involved in government, the government process that takes place through the student association. And I mean, Nancy has first-hand knowledge of this because she's worked with a lot of students who are now in law school or are lawyers, students who have gone to medical school and now physicians. One student, at least 2 students that I know of that were vice presidents of athletics that are now doctors.
And we had a student that was a vice president of health, that only because that was his position on this campus. I mean, he was, I don't remember what major he was, whether it was menswear or textile design, whatever, but because he was elected to be the representative of the student body in the area of the medical center, he got so involved in that, he then went on to med school. Lynn has some students that, having been in the programming end of it, have gone on to work with entertainment agents and record companies. It has opened up a lot of new career paths for them to be involved in, just as it did with Phil, to get into this field. Yeah. Because it really, this whole program gives them opportunities to see things outside of the classroom in all sorts of aspects of life. So it's fun to see how the students have redirected their careers based on their involvement.
And this is this place, this home here, this student activities now called Student Life Area, is a place where students meet and socialize. it's not all work. They do learn to socialize with people that are different than themselves. And we know also of students who have met here and gotten married.
That's right. That's right.
They come back with their kids.
That's right. They're twins.
Yes, and so both parents are FIT alumnus, so it's really nice. There's a lot of little rewards that we get years later from students we've worked with.
Could you talk a little about the leadership training weekend and how it developed?
Well, the earliest I remember is something we talked about as we were putting this together was President Feldman along with Mary Jones and a few other people had a retreat, and Lynn participated in that. And maybe you might want to talk a little bit about that. But this was a retreat work based in group dynamics and people
We all from
discussions.
Student Affairs Division went, and it was Marilyn Henryon, Nancy Foles, and Sue Clark who really put it together. And just as we do now with the students, we break them up in groups. That's what we did. We all broke up in groups, and there was different exercises and group dynamics. And even though we all knew each other, and it was a very small, I can't even, maybe 20 people. I'm not sure of the numbers. We got to know each other much better. And it was very interesting for me to participate on a personal level. I loved it. I never did anything like that before, and it was just, to me, it was so exciting and not like therapy, but really growing, I felt, and learning more about yourself. From that, they developed it with students, and Phil was
I was a student
at that
who
time.
went to that because it was fall of 1971, and I had just started at FIT. And early in the semester, I had heard about the faculty going, and I remember one of my teachers at the time, he's a retired professor, Steve Manville, had asked, do you think I should go on this? And he had actually asked the class. I don't know why. Yeah, we're all prodding, go ahead, you'd probably be good, because it meant that he couldn't come in. I think it was a Friday that everyone left, so our class was canceled and we had a substitute or whatever. And when he came back, he was aglow.
Yeah, that's what happened after you went. Because then, after Student Affairs went, there were different faculty that were going. And I remember, I forgot the woman's name. She, admission. She went away for a week. Long.
Oh, really?
And so did Sue. It was a week, very heavy, intense. I forgot her name. So Feldman was sending different people. So it wasn't only Student Affairs, and some people got to experience it. I don't know if everyone did, but there were some teachers that got to experience doing that.
I'd like to give some credit to the people that were here before I came, the ones that went on that retreat, the faculty members that went on that retreat, and as a result of going on the Student Affairs faculty retreat, developed the original student leadership workshops. That I recall involved Marilyn Henryon from the placement office, Nancy Foltz, is that from the career guide McCarthy. Nancy Foltz McCarthy now, but Nancy Foltz way back then. Jim Purdy from admissions, Sylvia Galvin from the registrar's office, Dean Jones,
Sue
Clark, right. Those are the names I remember as being the real initial authors of the workshop. And of course, Phil, went on
Yes.
one as a student.
Actually, wound up going on 3. It was a little different then than it is now. But one of the things, Audrey Meyer was a facilitator on maybe the second workshop, and several other people started to become involved. She liked it because of sociology and the relationship of working with groups. And so the group, the first student group, was about 30 students, 25 to 30 students. And the principal process that took place was learning about shared leadership, the concept of shared leadership, learning about yourself in a group and how you relate to others, how you are perceived by others. That hasn't changed.
Right.
We've
the group
kept that.
dynamics.
The core of the concept has remained.
Absolutely.
Most of the exercises are different or presented different than 20 years ago. Well, that's more than 20 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
But the basic philosophy we stand very firm on continuing, because before that we were told that students might have spent a day someplace on retreat or up in the mountains at a cabin or here on campus learning about parliamentary procedure. And we all have maintained that they can learn that here. We can give them pamphlets and teach them at a club meeting parliamentary procedure, but group dynamics and human relations skills is a very intense program. We like to have them go away on a retreat for a weekend where there's no other interference with family or dates or friends calling or homework to do. The students that go and the faculty and staff who go make a commitment for a solid 48 hours away from the rest of their lives to be totally committed for that weekend. And the program is until very, very late at night. It goes very, very late at night and starts early in the morning to keep the continuity flowing, to keep the learning building one upon the other, which cannot be done in a typical classroom, week by week workshop. That's something you don't get the same kind of an experience.
Who's the faculty that goes?
Yeah, I was just going to tell you about two aspects of it. Number one, the faculty that are trained to be facilitators on that workshop come from throughout the school. They're on a volunteer basis. I run an 8-week training program every spring. Sometimes I alternate it with the fall. So once a year, 8 to 10 faculty members or staff members who are involved with advising clubs are asked if they'd like to participate. And we usually have a waiting list for that. Faculty have heard over the years the success of the program, not only how influential the program is to the students, but they themselves learn skills in group dynamics and refresh ideas about how to teach not only in class, but how to deal with people and their students in and outside of class. So that's an 8-week program that is divided into 2 parts. The first 4 weeks of it emphasizes the actual exercises that they will be facilitating throughout the Friday to Sunday workshop that we go on twice a year with the students. The second 4 weeks of the program, they get an opportunity to select or design any exercise they want in the area of group behavior, group dynamics, values clarification, listening skills, whatever, and facilitate it themselves. And then we critique. The rest of the group critiques each one of these presentations. So by the end of the 8 weeks, they've had an opportunity to be the student, to actually experience the same exercises that the students will experience on the weekend, but also to practice facilitating and get critiquing to improve their skills. The final step of that 8-week in-service program is to go on a workshop as if a co-facilitator with somebody that has also be paired up with somebody that's been a facilitator before. So they're like still in training as a co-facilitator. And then after that initial weekend, if they feel comfortable, they can then go as the experienced facilitator with a new co-facilitator, or they can, if we can, because the list is long, they could go again to try one more time as a co-facilitator and feel a bit more comfortable before they take it on themselves. So that's the other aspect of the program. The students basically come from the extracurricular program, from the clubs. Each of the clubs are notified that they have the opportunity to send individuals, and they submit their names to Phillip. But there was one year, if you recall way back when, that there was Marvin was very supportive of this program, and oftentimes asked me if I could train every faculty member in the entire institution. And I remember saying to Marvin, you can't do that. Not everybody is right for this kind of a position. You can't force this on faculty members that are perhaps not as open or communicative or as comfortable themselves about their group dynamics and how they are in a group, and force them to go through a workshop and then do this in turn with the students. And he kept insisting, but it would be so good for everybody. Everybody should have this. And we still hear that. Everybody says everybody should have this. It is that strong of a program, both for the faculty and the students. And one year, he actually mandated the treasurer of the college to participate. At the time, his name was Fred Blatt. And Mr. Blatt was a true treasurer and very much into his numbers and his business, and had a bit of trouble dealing with human relations. And so the president, Marvin, was insistent that Fred participate in the 8-week training program. And although I insisted that this was not really workable because he would be hostile and it would affect the other faculty members in the group, he did participate. And it was a very unique experience. He went through the workshop, but we did not encourage him, nor did I believe he wanted to really continue and go on to the workshops. And of course, it did not change his behavior, which is something that we do not guarantee, but it was an experience, and I thought very interesting that Marvin, the president of the college, was so much involved with wanting his people to be good communicators and to have good human relation skills, that he insisted that one of his top administrators participate in this.
Well, did he initiate the program originally?
No.
No.
Program
The
was
Student
in place-
Affairs Division.
Student Affairs Division.
The members that I talked about
Right,
before
okay.
were the ones that
That
actually.
preceded him.
No, he was
was-
president.
He was the president at the time.
Yeah, but he
Marilyn
had
Henryon
nothing-
was here at the
Oh,
time.
Right. All those people
Yes.
were here, and they were active as counselors in different departments
But he
within
did
the
have
school.
the retreats.
He had that for the faculty,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So-
But not the student leadership
I
program.
understand.
Right.
The 71-72
Right.
academic year is when
Right.
the retreats took place.
But there is another aspect to the leadership workshops that I'd like to mention, and that was, at one point in the last 22 years, a lot of people have asked that this should be a course, that this should be something that all students experience. And in order to show its effect, we took a class. Instead of taking the students from the extracurricular program, I worked with Ruth Rubinstein and Audrey Meyer from the Sociology Department, and we took a class of students that were sociology students to a workshop to see if there'd be a difference between just these random students that really were not interested particularly in extracurricular activities, but were going as a class. It was obviously as successful as any other workshop, but even more so because when the teachers returned afterwards and continued to teach their sociology class, I remember the phone call saying, "I can't believe my students. They're different people. They're raising their hand, they're asking, they're talking, they're checking out assumptions, they're working well with their teams, and it's in a totally different class." As a result of that, the Sociology Department and myself developed a course based on the leadership training program. We called it Modern Organizations and Group Processes, and it combined all of the leadership workshop kinds of programs and emphases with sociological theory and practice of modern organizations. This is about how many years? 10, 12 years ago, maybe?
Must be.
About 10 to 12 years ago. And the course was approved and piloted with Ruth Rubinstein and myself co-teaching it. And the course is still, I believe, being offered totally by the Sociology Department. Unfortunately, the faculty members in the Student Affairs Division have yet to get true support as to their qualifications to teach in the classroom, even though we do have the degree and obviously expertise in developing these programs. So the course is still being taught, but not by members of this division. But it was a very interesting.
What do you mean? You're not allowed to teach the courses? Is that what you're saying?
We are considered non-classroom faculty, counselors in the Student Affairs Division. And although we hold faculty rank, it is non-classroom, and there are members of the administration and faculty that believe strongly in the term non-classroom, I suppose, and do not recognize our area of expertise as being one that could be held in the classroom. That started back then when this course was offered and written by us in this department and taught that first pilot, but then I was asked not to teach, that the Sociology Department would continue with it. And they still do. They still have.
They did come
This happened
to us
again.
one year during winter.
Yes, during the winter.
Ruth couldn't teach it
Right.
because she was working on a research project, I believe, in Israel at the time. And
Right.
they asked us, and Nancy wasn't available that winter, but I was, and so I taught it.
But that was the last.
That was it.
That was it.
That was it until we.
That's the social science department.
It is being run
Yes,
through the social science department.
the
Right.
sociology area.
Right.
Yes.
Who
And
is
the
the social science department or administrators? The dean.
I'm sorry, say that
Who
again.
asked you to teach at the social science department?
The original course when it was approved?
No, when you.
Oh, who asked you to teach?
Spencer Shine was chair at
Oh,
the
is
time.
it
Yeah, so he was
social
science?
looking
It was
for
social
someone
science.
to teach the class.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That same scenario, our division, and certainly our office, one of the first things I did when I came here was designed a brochure for this office, and the title of the brochure is "We're in the Teaching Business Too," quote unquote. We still use that title, and I guess it's still appropriate because that is our thrust, that we constantly have to, I guess, prove to people or convince people, validate that that's what we do. We teach. We just don't blow up balloons and have movies. That what our real goal is all of the steps of leadership development and, again, life skills that an individual needs to learn in order to survive, whether they be fiscal skills, marketing skills, communication skills, management skills, stress management, time management, how to deal with people, relationships, all of these kinds of learning skills is what the students get by being involved in extracurricular activities. So we are in the teaching business too. As a result of that, we obviously get involved in writing curricula, such as the course, this Modern Organizations and Group Processes course of years back, but also recently of a freshman success course that we call HD 101, or it used to be called Freshman Experience, and then, which was written by basically members of the Division of Student Affairs, not just our office, but the division, and was modeled after a nationally regarded curriculum effort in the area of retention for new students, to help them develop survival skills, to make it through college, to help them understand study skills, different teaching relationships, diversity, decisions for life in the area of AIDS and rape and alcohol abuse, time management, stress management, all of the kinds of things new students really should have down before they then can continue to succeed in their courses. And the FIT Curriculum Committee approved it, and we were all very excited about it, and we got approval to pilot it. And it was piloted for 1 year, but then just killed. And it hasn't occurred since. Though those are the kinds of things that we haven't, for all these years, attempted to do, to try and teach through the classroom or through our workshops, demonstrations, sessions, to help these students with those kinds of skills. And the students, all throughout the years, have been receptive, very much appreciative of these kinds of life skills. I used to work at Barnard College, Columbia University, before I came to FIT. And when I came here, the one thing I really noticed was that the students here were like sponges. They really understood that everything that we had to offer them was part of their education, which is, of course, what we believe, that it's a very integral part of their education. Whereas at Barnard College, it was extra, not necessary, not really part of what was important in their courses, but the fun and games part of life. Here, every single student government that I've dealt with, and there are 22 students on each student government every year for 20 years, has really appreciated the growth that they've gotten. And years after, send us letters saying how they've applied their learning, how much it helped them to deal with people in their businesses.
What is that term? Copying is the greatest form of flattery.
Flattery,
like
right.
that.
Imitation.
Imitation,
Right.
yes. What I was saying was that in the last 20 years, there are a couple of courses, maybe 15 years ago, that were developed. I don't know how long ago. One is an executive leadership out of the FBM department, and the other one is a group discussion out of the English department, where they deal with group process and group communication skills. And in the executive leadership area, there were group activities. Ethel Fishman was the professor there, and she taught it many, many years. She came on leadership workshop, and she also consulted with us to find new exercises to grow with the changes that take place, and her research as to what should be taught in her class. The students have come back and said, wow, I learned some of this before, and that was in the group discussion course in the English department, where they learned about how students communicate in groups. It's only a small segment of what we teach on the leadership workshop or how we teach our students throughout the year. But what we do is more of an experiential training throughout the school year, informally and formally with workshops, etc. Most recently, the FBM department and the marketing department, probably mostly FBM, has developed several new programs. Several new courses that are now using some of the things that we teach. As a matter of fact, the people have been through the training programs that Nancy has been running and have been on the leadership workshop weekends, have been using the leadership workshop in a sense as a basic training ground to learn the skills. And then they've written courses that deal with time management, stress management, group discussion, group communications, how to give and receive feedback, all the things we do. So it's quite a compliment to us. But we've been doing this now since before we even started working here. It started out of this department, and it's nice to be involved in that process now, even though we're doing it in an extracurricular way to help train some of the faculty. Not saying that we're completely responsible for all of those others, but the ideas certainly did get some assistance from this area.
Could you explain the structure of the student government, the offices?
Sure. That's a very interesting historical change too. When I first came, there was one small, maybe 7 or 8 member executive board of the student association. All the full-time day students pay a student activity fee. And they all become members of what is the government of the college, or the student association. However, the executive board is the governing board of that group, and they're elected annually. And all students in good standing can run. And we have a regular election with a voting booth, which also helps teach students how to become active participants in government, because they actually experience real-life voting. That board was in existence until Ann Riley, the student government president, and I can't remember what year that was.
She wasn't the president. She was
Max Meyer Award winner.
Yeah.
Anyway, that, I don't know, over 10 years, maybe 14 years, 13 or 14 years.
Yeah.
When we had grown so much, we had worked hard to have all these additional events, and we had fee increase proposals approved by the Board of Trustees, so we had more money to deal with, or the students had more money to deal with. And there was just too much work for those 6 or 8 people on the original government executive board to control. So the students changed their constitution to read that there be 2 boards, an executive board and a programming board. And there are approximately 10 members, 11 and 10 on each board. The executive board of the student government is made up of a group of vice presidents that are really liaisons between existing entities on the campus and the student body, whether it be VP of Health, VP of Athletics, VP of a Student Affairs Committee, VP of Communications, what am I missing? On the exec board. VP of Alumni Affairs. All of these kinds of positions are liaison positions, and very much policy making, management oriented. They deal with the overall budget, which now, after all these years, is up to $500,000 in fees. So it's big bucks. They are really learning fiscal planning and budgeting extremely well. The other board, the programming board, has a series of managers of different types of programming events, whether it be manager of films. What else?
Entertainment Hour, Hall of Art, Game Room, Craft Center.
Films.
No, I said films.
Special events?
Oh, cultural, special, social. And over the years it has changed, because we had Binsky's at one time, and then we had a disco night, and we somewhat changed that. We did social activities and special events, of course times have changed. And that's a group of 11 students with a VP of programming, which also sits on the executive board, and he or she is the liaison, and she tells us, or he tells us, what's going on with the exec board, because they're at 2 different meetings. And they meet once a week, and they're the person with committee members that plan, the Monday night movies, the Tuesday common hours, the lounge, the manager of the lounge, and they have all their different activities that they plan.
It's grown tremendously
Yeah.
because with the first group of students, the 5 or 6 students dealt with a very small budget and very little programming. But as we grew, obviously, the programming board alone, the amount of money that's allocated to them from the executive board and the student association is hundreds of thousands of dollars for events that occur every day and every night of the year. And on the other hand, the executive board is dealing constantly with very serious political concerns about their involvement in having say on committees in this college. Whether they are sitting on curriculum committee, they do. A lot of these students sit on the college committees, curriculum committee, registrar's committee, diversity committee, assessment committee, and each year new committees are formed or new positions on the boards are formed to meet the needs of the students. We did not have a vice president of alumni affairs.
Only recently.
That came about maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
They sit on the committees to make decisions with the committee members?
Exactly, and have input into some of the major decisions of the college. Their decisions, however, when it comes to their own money, the student activity fee money, is theirs. And all of that $500,000, they allocate out to those 65 clubs and organizations or special programs each year that people ask for. Anything from club-oriented activities to
AIDS.
What are their
to AIDS.
guidelines?
They develop their own guidelines on how the money is spent and what it's based on, whether it be, there are certain rules of being a student club. And one is that they must go to student council meetings, they must have fundraisers. Something that we developed not too distant future was that all clubs have to do mandatory community service in order to receive funds, or else they're penalized. And that's really developed. I mean, it's not so much forced upon them as much as they're really actively involved now in doing wonderful things with groups in the city. So these kinds of guidelines, it's based on how active a group was the year before, in the past, what their plans are for the future, how many people are in their club, all of that. And of course, how much money they've got to spread out over 65 clubs and organizations. So they try to be as fair and impartial as they can. And they've been very fiscally sound. I mean, they've been good managers over the years, perhaps a little bit too good, because they have a nice, comfortable safety net right now because they've saved money and they were not flamboyant with their money. And now with the city and the state and the fiscal crisis perhaps hitting the college, everybody's looking towards the student government to help bail them out when they've been fiscally sound all these years. But it's a wonderful learning experience for not only the 22 people involved on the boards, but the 100 or so representatives to the student council, reps from each of the clubs that are involved in policy and decision making.
How does it work in light of the fact so many students are commuters and have jobs besides? How does that
All the student government meetings are from 1 to 2. And from the time I was hired, from the time I was hired, that was always built in at this institution by our own board of trustees. That fortunately they believed strongly enough in the extracurricular program to build it in on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock when no classes are supposed to be scheduled. So students are, whether they're commuting or dorm students, have that time to participate in all of these programs.
The programs have grown so much that we do have meeting space available at the end of the day also. So some groups, the programming board does meet once a week,
5:30 to 6:30.
So that does happen, as well as some clubs that meet for more than an hour, and they have that opportunity at the end of the day because there aren't that many students in the day school who would be missing a class. The opportunity for students to become actively involved is up to them. The opportunity is there, and it's voluntary, and the activism that they participate in is really reflective of the democratic society within which we live. And they get the experience of working with a community, FIT, and the outskirts of FIT, the local community, through the democratic process. And whether it's a club or an executive office that they're elected through a college-wide election, they learn about lobbying for ideas, they learn about the election process, They learn about campaigning. They campaign. They make speeches. They learn about budgeting and how to prepare a budget, how to lobby their efforts for what they feel is important. They learn to develop a core group that would represent their efforts. They learn about consensus seeking, and to seek that consensus in trying to get another group to learn about their ideas so that it would move in their direction. So really we're reflecting the democratic society that we live in, and it's the American form of democracy. There are different types, but the American form is what we're professing, and the student government has a checks and balance system set up, and then we're here all the time as advisors to maintain continuity over the years, because they would never know unless we were here. And the advisors for the clubs are an integral part of this process. They remain to be the continuity from year to year to year for that particular special interest group, whether it's ethnically oriented, socially oriented, environmentally oriented, or major oriented. The largest amount of active students, I would say, is in the major related clubs, because merchandising society for FBM students, marketing club for marketing students,
menswear
for menswear students. But one of the things that has been important, that's in the student constitution, is that any student may join any club. They're not allowed to discriminate. And it really has helped, because some students who are in one club or one major might join a club that's not related to their major.
Promote that.
And learning how to collaborate. We try to get different clubs to work together on projects too.
Do you know what percentage of the students are club members?
I think in the major related clubs, most of them, which is unusual in a college, university setting. They're mostly special interest types of groups, the dance club or that kind of stuff. But we have all of those. We have those students for peace and the African Heritage Club or the Korean Club. We have those. We have the school newspaper and the yearbook and the school radio station. We have those. Those are typical on most campuses. But what's different here is that we have I think we have a club for every major. Toy design club. The graduate students have a club.
Interior design club, everything.
Restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they all have a club. And so what happens there is the students at FIT are different than other types of students. They fall into that technical academic category, and that group of students wants more than what might be offered in the typical curriculum. And so when they're active in a club, they get guest speakers from their field to come in and speak.
There are a couple of interesting programs over the years, historically, that I'm sure, like you'd like to talk about. I know there's one thing I'd love to just mention is something like what is now called ICON. Years ago, there were a group of students, and I don't know what year that was when
70,
early 70s?
4, maybe.
Yeah. When the students came and complained that there wasn't any kind of a outlet for their literary talent. We had a yearbook and we had fashion shows and all of that, but we didn't have poetry and short stories. Now, we, of course, don't have a major in English at this college, and it is not one of the strengths that you would think of when you think of FIT, but there are students that like to write and like to express themselves, whether it's poetry or short story or whatever. So in a very simplified version of a black and white put together little booklet, the first literary magazine came out, and it was entitled There's a Future in Plastics, which was really quite
from The Graduate.
Right, quite funny. It was a takeoff from a line from a movie with Dustin Hoffman called The Graduate, but here you're talking about futures and everything other than that, and so it was a very clever, I thought, title, There's a Future in Plastics, that the students came up with. The cover of the first issue was a dummy, what do you call it? One of those mannequins wrapped in plastic cellophane. And a year or two later, when they wanted to do a nude person. There was terrible controversy in this college about airbrushing the appropriate places on this body so that the front cover of this publication would not be pornographic or obscene. But that's how that magazine started. It then developed and grew, changed its name to Creative Showcase, and went to other majors in addition to just having poetry and literature. And so examples of work, photography, pictures of jewelry, whatever, of other majors were in this. And we now have the most fantastic, can I show it to you? Fantastic collection. This is this year's.
It won an award.
Yeah, it wins awards often. Of artwork. And samples of different, from the different majors, but not just artwork. There's poetry in here too, as you can see on these thin pieces of paper. There are poems, and all done by students, done through an extracurricular organization made up of students from whatever majors they want. The advisor is Kevin Byrne from our counseling center, who is a writer himself, so he's been involved with helping them select and judging the poetry and the artwork. And it's just a phenomenal publication that serves the students wonderfully well as a portfolio piece when they go looking for jobs and going out into the market. And this is all a result of an extracurricular, student-funded through fits of funds, kinds of changes over the years from it's a future in plastics to icon. And we've seen that with a lot of our student programs. The one thing we're bringing back after 25 years. You want to tell them about the talent show?
Oh, yes.
Tell them about the original one.
Okay, originally in 1970.
Three or four,
we started a faculty staff talent show, and we had, at that time, Richard Strider was the dean. He was streaking, was very popular, and he ran across the stage, not really naked, but he had one of those, things.
He had a poster in front of him, and he was wearing a bathing suit, but he looked as though
like
he was streaking.
And we had Vicky Barbero, and
who was at the time?
What was she? She was assistant
to the president.
Georgette and Betty Harris, who was originally a student here, and then she ran the EOP program.
And Georgette Gittins is now
affirmative action director.
Right.
And they did lip syncing of Patti LaBelle, Voulez-vous coucher avec moi, and
that was good, right?
Yeah,
you knew that.
Yeah. It was great. And Nancy was.
Oh, I sang. I actually sang with a guitar, didn't I?
Yes, but you were pregnant, or you weren't pregnant?
I was pregnant.
And you were a pregnant groom, and Jim Purdy was a bride with a beard and with her.
And we closed
gown on.
the mock fashion show with the bride and groom. Our backs were to the audience. Yeah. And Jim is about my height, so he had on my wedding gown, and I had on black tails and a hat. But I was pregnant, but the students couldn't see because we were facing the curtain. And then, as the concluding fashion show number, we turned around and walked down. It was a wonderful, wonderful, spirit-provoking and bonding experience for the college. It brought the faculty, staff, and students together in a very wonderful, warm fashion, and we are bringing it back.
Right. So November 29th, 1994, we will have the faculty staff talent show
in honor of the 50th.
Yeah. Right. And so that should be fun, I hope.
So it's reliving the past a little, bringing it back into focus.
There are some new directions that we are working on, and as a matter of fact, the term icon, we brought out the magazine, there's a vocabulary that's entered into our society, and it's relating to computers. We hear about syntax errors or deleting something or programming something. The term icon rang a bell with me because, in fact, right after this, I'm meeting with a few student government officers. We're talking about introducing electronic mail into student government. And it's in the talking stages now, and I've been doing some research, and there are a few students who are very willing to take extra time beyond their regular program activities and classwork to learn as much as they can about electronic mail and what's available through the internet. And that's one of the next things that we're going to do. The college itself cannot support something, at least at this time, for the students, and the students are going to venture out on that on their own. And it's going to be computers and electronic mail, and that's where we're headed. That's what's happening in business. That's what's happening all over the place, and they're looking to keep up with what's happening in business and learn a lot of that right here.
We're drawing to a close. If there's anything else that you'd like to add.
Do you have any one particular memory from history that?
Oh, I have a good one. When I first started, women could not wear pants. You had to wear a dress or a skirt. Shirley Goodman, who was
The vice
president, she was
one of the founders.
So you say women, faculty and students.
Faculty and staff and students could not wear pants. It was a snowy day, and C lobby, and there used to be a telephone operator, switchboard operator, Isabel and Trudy, and Shirley Goodman walked in. It was cold, it was snowy, with pants. That was it. That deterred everyone else.
From then on.
And
everybody wore slacks.
Everybody was so excited, that you could wear pants now, and it was a very big deal in school.
It was a wonderful family way back then. It was smaller. People really seemed to care. The administration, I believe, really wanted to communicate and very much was involved with what was happening with the students and the faculty and staff of the college. It was a very warm, loving place.
The few things that click in my head. I'm wearing a tie that was given to me by Dorothy and Marvin Feldman. It's an FIT logo all over it. And my initial relationship with the school was really through my sister, Marie Therese, who graduated in '72. But 10 years ago, I met the person who became my wife. Ellen LaFontaine was a student here in the mid-'80s, and in the later '80s, so we got married, and so I'm happily married to an FIT alumnus.
Have you seen married couples here?
Yes. Carrie and what's her name? Rita.
And Roy and Judy.
Roy and Judy.
With these people?
And these are students. These are students that got married.
Carrie Franzman, Rita Manning.
That were in student government.
Yes.
Right.
They met on leadership workshop.
Yes. Judy Loof and Roy Alexander. They're more recent.
Right. But we've even seen faculty.
Rao.
I do believe Rao
Rasinovich married a student who was on the tennis team.
Right. And didn't
Alan Fishman? No.
Did Alan Fishman?
Yeah.
Did Sam Beiser?
Sam Beiser did. I don't remember her name.
Did Mike?
No, not Mike Silson.
No. So there have been those relationships.
There's definitely been a few here.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you want to touch? I'll mention some other issues that have come up. Relationship to industry, relationship to the unions, the union role or anything, relationship to the board of trustees or anything that you might.
Well, recently the students have been, I guess, creating a relationship with the union that may not have existed as closely.
The in-house union.
Yeah, because they're both groups are under quite a bit of pressure with the changes that have taken place at FIT with the economic problems that we have, and so I see that there's more communication between the union and the student association taking place in the last 2 years, much more. Within
to increase the funding.
Well, to share problems and problem solving with how to deal with the administration in various issues that have to do with the economics here. That's about as simple and broad as I can. With industry, a few years ago, the students created a new officer position called Vice President for Alumni Affairs, and there the student gets to meet people who graduated from FIT and are in industry, and so that's growing.
And more of a development of networking between the current students and even trying to develop programs such as mentoring with alumni in the field to have the current students be able to to meet and perhaps shadow some of the alumni in the industry, all through this extracurricular program through the VP of Enrollment.
The way the various departments that have majors relate to their graduates, their alumni, to maintain a relationship with them. We've done that more so with students who have graduated but came out of student life someplace. They were an officer in student government or club president or whatever. But now what's happening is the student government is going to be able to get close a gap with other alumni in general, all the way across the board. And so that what they want to do on campus anyway is try to have a resource for guest speakers. People who went to FIT are active in industry someplace, maybe in their major, to come back and speak. And the mentorship is really, really important, especially the future for jobs. And
So that's coming from the departments as well as
Both.
through
It's
you.
absolutely.
yeah, that comes from.
But if we're going to close, I would like just to say one more thing.
Absolutely.
And that is, it's been about 20 years that the three of us have worked together and have really, I think, made the student life program at this college probably one of the best in the country. And I want to say that I think working with you, both of you, is absolutely fantastic, and I love you.
This is the first kissing we've seen in the
Not
We
this
usually don't have
office.
the camera
This
out.
office, we kiss a lot. We love each other.
This
We
is a
may start
family.
a tradition on the program.
Yeah, we look at it as a family.
We are.
do.
We're really a close group, and we really feel like a family. And that what we've achieved here, we've done together. And we're very proud of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.